So the recognition is there that we need to do things differently and need to change. And now it's about like, how do you drive those resources?
Welcome to Generation AI, the podcast where we demystify artificial intelligence in higher education and beyond. And today it's a lot about beyond in higher education. I am your co-host, JC Bonilla, with my other co-host, who have not seen because he's been traveling everywhere, Ardis Kadiu. How you doing, my friend?
Hey, JC. Doing great. I'm so glad I'm home. Just in time for Halloween.
The question is, if I ask Diana, your wife, would she say the same? I'm so glad you're home.
Yeah, she actually just told me, she's like, oh man, I don't know if I can take this, you being home or you not having something to do.
I think you'll be a pain on the ass at home. And I also forecast probably like 3 days of that, and you're going to just jump into whatever you're doing. Which, by the way, it's an episode, right? You and I have an episode where we want to start talking about all these signals that are adjacent to AI, that shape AI, not only as a technology, which we usually double click on, but we also want to talk about, these product drops and how they start to shape the signals and the bubble, the labor market, kind of marketing, product place and things of that sort. So we have about 4 updates that we want to walk through, and then spend a lot of time reacting to being on the road. Ardis probably 50,000 miles later, right? I've done a little bit of travel myself. And yeah, what are we seeing on the road? And what is the shape, the signals that are driving our AI economy, products, and adoption? Sounds good, Ardis?
Sounds great. Yeah. I mean, my X feed is full of, and my YouTube feed is full of conversations around AI bubble. So AI bubble is one of the top conversations that's trending for me. And obviously, when you think about AI, there's different layers, right? There's the economy layer, there's the investment layer, there's the application layer, adoption. So there's a lot of different kind of angles that you can approach this. So hopefully we can have a conversation today around what's happening everywhere. How's the adoption happening? How's the technology progress and the investments in the technology, and what are those signals? And then, just like you said, what are we hearing in higher education from our conversations with CIOs and technologists and end users as well?
So let's jump in. We will not be doing justice to all this bubble conversation if we did not address the Amazon layoffs. If you're not following, this week, Amazon announced the layoffs of about 14,000 corporate/white-collar jobs. That's about 4% of the workforce, Ardis. And it's part of a quote-unquote restructuring. So think about these jobs that are being let go. They look like engineering, technology, HR, legal, marketing, that type of places. Context, think about like 600 software engineers in Washington State will be impacted, right? Now, the company says this is not an AI automation play. This is basically not purely cost cutting or AI doing this. It's about being leaner, about a fast organization. So speaking of layers, there's some layers that we wanted to discuss here, right? But at the same time, and this is where the friction is, right, is we know that simultaneously Amazon is just pouring dollars on their investments in AI infrastructure, right? So cloud infrastructure, AWS, right? And it's a really important AI model of investment that many people have opinions that it is AI driven, it is AI influenced, it is AI adjacent. So I see this as a very interesting topic. I'll give you the quick teasers, and then I'll like to hear from you, Ardis. How do you process this, right? So obviously the implications for me in AI is that AI is reshaping the org chart. We know that, we feel that, and this is a way of Amazon signaling we're getting ready for this, and it's how AI shapes the org chart. Agility is the new efficiency type of thing, right? Now, talent is shifting, not really shrinking. So the way I see this is as we start thinking about jobs that disappear and move away, these are the ones where AI is kind of easily amplifying or replacing, if you will, right? And of course, infrastructure is the real battleground now. In places like Amazon, their ability to double down on AWS and infrastructure, it's a competitive advantage. So probably a way to look at that AI backbone. So what do you say of these artists? How do you take this news while you were on the road? Because it happens while you were traveling.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I kind of agree with the notion that, AI is kind of pushing a lot of these different changes. Amazon is the largest hyperscaler right now in terms of their infrastructure. They had a very bad week last week, which was, we haven't even talked about that. This is the AWS. We're specifically talking around AWS here, like their web services, and that's how we fit into the AI part. But they had a bad week when they were offline for about 12 to 18 hours, and we were affected, and a lot of service providers were affected from that. And it's kind of really sad to see that how concentrated some of that technology is on these hyperscalers. But regardless, AWS is a huge profit center for Amazon. And they grew the slowest out of the three hyperscalers, right? So they grew slower than Google, they grew slower than Microsoft, and Google is they grew about 14%. So because they're a public company, they need to show that they can, like their margins are not affected, and so the way they can do that is by saying, okay, we're going to restructure, and they need to give the street, essentially Wall Street, some signals that they're doing something in order to accelerate their growth and in order to kind of reduce the human aspect and kind of improve the margin and so on and so forth. So obviously this is a big signal for them in order to do that, and AI is an enabler in terms of it allowing them to do more with less. So it's kind of fitting in. It's enabling them to actually go through this reshape. You're not necessarily going to see Amazon coming out and saying, "Well, this is AI driven," but internally it kind of is, right? It's like they're not coming to the public and saying that, but internally it's absolutely the case that they're benefiting from some of those improvements there. So leaner teams, smaller teams, it's the name of the game. Moving fast and kind of reducing that margin on people is important. So I don't know. That's kind of the way I'm interpreting it, and of course this is some of the commentary on X and some of the other analysts as well.
Yeah, let's move to another important news in the bubble, right? And this is going to take us into OpenAI, specifically two things that we're seeing on the OpenAI ecosystem as a company, right?
So before we get to this one, so there's OpenAI news. So these are just specific around, like we want to get into the application layer, but the big news that dropped over the past 2 days, and even as we're recording this, OpenAI, if you remember, or we've had these discussions before, is a non-for-profit organization. And there was one of the arms that was, they wanted to move to a for-profit organization in order to accelerate and become a public company so they could raise more money and to kind of accelerate. So this year they have made over $500 billion commitments in AI infrastructure to different companies that have worked with, from NVIDIA to Stargate with Oracle and so on and so forth. So they have basically consumed all of the private money there is. So they needed to get more money in order to build this infrastructure. And yesterday, it was announced that they have made the conversion. The biggest thing that was holding them back, obviously, was Microsoft. So they reworked the deal with Microsoft, which owned a pretty big chunk of it. And as of today or yesterday, they announced that they're in conversations and they are pursuing the conversion to a public company. So their for-profit arm is moving to a public company with a $1 trillion valuation, and $1 trillion, which is freaking incredible. It is the largest ever company to go public in terms of the value ever, right? But that's the only way that they can raise more money. They can tap into other people's capital. in order to kind of build this next future. So I just wanted to kind of bring that forward because there's this conversation is coming up over and over around the whole AI bubble. There's just way too much money going into this infrastructure. And the way that I see it, a lot of folks are equating it to the dot-com boom and bust, right? Where it was a telecom, the dot-com was a telecom bust, where Cisco, for example, was valued at 160 times their earnings, which is incredible and it's crazy. I don't think we have that problem today. Like the dark fiber, if you remember the dark fiber problem. I mean, I was in school at the time, so like I was, I had just missed it a little bit. And as we read it in case studies now during our MBA days, it was all about the pets.com and like all those companies that was nothing there, but then it was also a dot-com a kind of a telecom boom, bust, like a lot of dark fiber, like all the infrastructure that was getting built, it wasn't getting used, right? There was no demand for it. Fast forward to today where we are, and it's like OpenAI, there's no GPUs that are idle, so every GPU is getting used today, and there's just not enough GPUs. If you follow NVIDIA, they had their conference this past Tuesday, and they said they have $500 billion in orders to fulfill that they are backlogged on their Blackwell GPUs in 2026, which is freaking incredible. They could be doing nothing right now and just sell that backlog and still be the most profitable company out there. So, and by the way, NVIDIA just passed $5 trillion in market cap. $5 trillion. Incredible. So I want to bring that back, and I want to kind of overlay that in terms of like what's happening with the bubble and how people are thinking about this. So those are incredible amounts of money. But then going down to the application layer and the model layer, we had some really interesting things with, like you said, with Sora. Well, actually, you didn't say it yet, but maybe I'm kind of stealing your thunder here. So
no, this is good, right? Because and to recap, the transformation of OpenAI from Core B to this public entity, to this private entity that is allowed, it's for profit, as a precursor to what you just broke, that they would probably go in as a public organization with the largest IPO ever seen, right? So it's fascinating.
Are you saving some money, JC, to put to go long on OpenAI?
I am going to go very long. I mean, it would be for those of us who would put in like little peanuts there in the market, it would be disingenuous if we just don't double down and like what we believe in, right? So not only I wanted to do good, I need to signal that I'm all in this type of thing, right? So that's a different conversation. And remember, don't take our advice as it comes to financials. That's not what
disclaimer.
Disclaimer. Now, but a really interesting point that you're referring to the bubble. It's that why this doesn't feel like a 1990s, and no disclaimer, now I'm an economist. There's a high concentration of this investment in gigantic pot of money on organizations that look very different to the ones in the 2000s in the dot bubble, because one of the crunches that we saw there was the cash flows, and all these startups just couldn't pay bills. It's very different now, right? Because what we're seeing is $1 trillion company here, $1 trillion company there, right? A $1 trillion company backing each other. It's a very different pressure in terms of those investments. So back to OpenAI and how they're using these investments. One of the things that they pushed for was Sora 2, which we spoke about it. Ardis, you did a fantastic session recently on how Sora 2 is changing the game as it relates to next generation video and audio, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, this week, they tell us, hey, everybody, OpenAI, right? I am here to try to compete on the browser words, right? So we've done a show on AI browsers and what does it mean? And the rollout of Atlas, the browser, very interesting. So together, I think those are important signals, following the bubble, following the way this company is thinking about their journey. And of course, as we know, they're big dominant. So let me just unpack what I'm seeing and why I think it's important to speak about Sora 2, because it's a big promise. but big problems, right? So Sora 2, next generation video, audio generative model supports everything in terms of creative and making these videos and audios physically accurate, realistic, synchronized, dialogue, everything. It's just amazing. But all of a sudden, we as a practitioners, we go all out and start basically pushing the boundaries of ethical and legal issues, right? And there's a lot of deep fake memes. By the way, artists, have you seen all these beautiful cats saving babies out in the wild? It's the best, right? A bear comes, a tiger comes, and a cat or a dog or saves a little infant, right? There's a ton of deep fake style that it's being consumed, but some of this content has push buttons that, for example, the Martin Luther King Jr. family requested OpenAI to post its depiction of Martin Luther King in Sora 2. A lot of influencers are being represented by the Hollywood area, say like, hey, I did not opt in, I don't want to be part of these conversations. Why is my IP part of this, right? So copyright issues, and what you're seeing here is, artists, the idea that time to value is vital, but time to trust is equally important. There's no frameworks to address these things. Let's be clear. There's no frameworks today that address how OpenAI technologies, right, should really wrap around copyright issues and legal ethicals. They're emerging. So one of the things that I appreciate that they've done is that they're pushing the boundaries, right? But the trust to value, it's a really important conversation. How did this land to you as it relates to Sora 2? And kind of, are you seeing this and this over-indexing in your news feeds?
Yeah, to be honest, it didn't actually appear in my news feeds. So I was surprised that we added this as part of the conversation, because when you look at it, it's more of a Sora 2 and VO3 becoming like the video models, and the story is, okay, now we've transitioned and moved and accelerated into kind of content creation. And for these AI models to run, they need a lot of resources. They need a lot of GPUs to run. And right now, OpenAI just doesn't have enough of those. And so I've been looking at it from that perspective, like the demand side for AI perspective. So when we think about the content creation side, it's like, well, yeah, of course, OpenAI and Sam Altman, like their vision is to enter and compete with Meta, and the way that they did that is with a social network video model. So they're competing with Meta, they're competing with TikToks. They want to, which is really, really smart, right? They don't want to be the infrastructure; they want to be the consumer company, and that's where they're getting most of their money from. So it's natural that, excuse me, you're going to run into some of these issues, just like the social media companies had the same exact issues with content. And they had the same exact issues with ownership and what was published in their platforms, and there was laws around that were created. So now they just have to figure out these IP laws. It's just, that has to be figured out, right? Like that part has to be figured out. So they put the guardrails in place already for Sora 2. So now you can't use some of these IP characters and things like that. And yeah, I think they're just releasing a lot of stuff very fast, right? It's like right now it sucks to not be in the market. So speed is the name of the game. And then you figure out the guardrails right after. So it doesn't mean that, it's going to take forever. It just means that, okay, let's get things out there very, very quickly. Let's get some adoption, and then we're going to figure out the IP and the guardrails.
100%. What you see, by the way, probably over indexes on my feed because of all the liberal stuff that I listen into, right? So because what you see here in this example here is where the tool races ahead of policy, artists, right? And by the way, is it Udio that they settle with Universal Music Group, right? So 100%. So anyway, that's happening. It's a really interesting conversation. And I guess my point of view is that these two monsters will converge, technology advancement and policy. And right now, one is ahead of the other. So governance matters, obviously, and that's kind of how this is playing out. It's important for creators, for people in these industries to remember that, yeah, it sucks when your IP is not being commercialized the right way and protected, but that will happen. And just keep in mind that the platform dynamics here is that there's a shift, artists, right? These tools are becoming probably a new social media feed, right? And creation engines of jumping onto them and having the protection of the legal frameworks. It's kind of where it's at.
Yeah, but also the distribution is it's where people are going to go. So if
Yes,
you know if your IP is not there, and we're seeing that now from kind of the search engine optimization side, right? Whereas before, there was a lot of guard walls, and but now if your stuff doesn't appear in ChatGPT, essentially you don't exist anymore. So you miss out on all that traffic, all those eyeballs. So it's kind of a double-edged sword right now. So you need to be on all the channels, but there's a little bit of a give and take, and things aren't quite there yet.
This brings me back to a TikTok, Vayner X vibes when, you start seeing cranberry juices, right? Or indexing a generation that never care about cranberry juices, right? And then music from the 70s also like having a comeback because creators used it and changed the game plan. So relevance is super important here. Let's shift to Atlas, the browser. Have you downloaded? Have you played with it? I just found out that the audio, right, the audio settlement with Universal Music's group comes from my search in Atlas. So let's give people just a backdrop here, and then I want to jump to you. Like, what do you think? What's happening here, right? So this week, OpenAI launched ChatGPT Atlas. It's a browser that deeply integrates with ChatGPT and agents. So basically, browsing meets Agentic, browsing meets ChatGPT capabilities in a more native way. Only for Mac users. Yes, I like that a lot. Key features, AI first results, chatbot style answers, links to secondary kind of browsing. So this idea of the suggested browsing. Browser memories, which is an important component of ChatGPT, right? And of course, AI writing help with tabs grouping and launching of agents, operator come and actually, I don't know, book this trip for me. So what think you, artists, of this? What do you think of Atlas? It's been fun using it this past week for me.
Yeah. So I've already, for some of you might be familiar with Comet, and then Arc is another AI browser. So Atlas is the latest one. Essentially, the way that I see this move is, it's a continuation of what we saw at OpenAI Dev Day, right? And Peter and I were talked about ChatGPT and this conversational interface and OpenAI. They want to be the everything app, right? And ChatGPT wants to be the everything app. But right now, a lot of those experiences, you go through the browser, and the browser is essentially today's everybody's everything app. You go through the browser to access all your other apps, all your other experiences. And what OpenAI has done with ChatGPT with their app kit is they have now allowing other properties to build applications that show in ChatGPT, but the experience is not quite there yet. So they want to move a step further and say, okay, the browser now has access to all of these different websites behind the scenes. So we want to accelerate that. Hence, we want to own the interaction layer, or we want to own the everything app, which is the browser. And what they've done is from a technical perspective, is really interesting. They just put out a technical paper or a technical article on how they did it, and what they did is that they're using Chromium, which is behind the scenes, and a lot of these browsers are using Chromium. But what they did with Chromium was really interesting. They're just isolated, and they built so much around it, and they essentially built their own app and using Chromium just for the rendering and the security components and a few other things. But they built it in a way where they can add their agents on top of it, and they control the whole experience. So it's going to be a lot smoother. It's going to be, a lot, control their whole experience. They built this whole layer on top of it from a technical perspective, which I thought was pretty interesting in how they're approaching it. And of course, they're building it in a way where it's like, okay, ChatGPT can become, that front door towards everything else that they have. they have a lot of different teams at OpenAI, so they're throwing a lot of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. We just went from Sora. They're trying with Sora app, right? They decided to put Sora as an application or as a mobile app to compete with TikTok and Facebook. Now they're competing with the browsers, right? With Perplexity. So they want more and more and more attention, and they're throwing a lot of stuff at the wall to see what sticks. So. If you haven't downloaded Atlas, I would highly recommend you do it. It's kind of a nice experience with agents for sure.
Yeah, it's a nice experience. One of the things I like particularly is if you have workspaces. So in this case, my browsing and the way I think about browsing meets work. So I can browse on things that are linked to, for example, a Google Drive documents. And it's fun to get the power of external sources with internal documentation. So if you were to think about browsing as indexing of information, right, so and relevance, so now you're able to relevance external and internal things. So I think that's super fun, and it's helping me a lot. It's very native to the way we prompt on ChatGPT, and I've kind of liked that. The commercial implications that I think are here ahead of us are very interesting, Ardis, because as we know, this is as competitive stab or jab at Google, as they dominate market share in terms of browsing with Chrome. I don't think that Perplexity had the impact that they wanted on Comet. It was I couldn't access Comet because I didn't have the right membership level. So it's very
$200.
Yeah. I mean, just $200, right? A month. But what can I say? I'm cheap. It's dominating browsing. It's probably one of the most important commercialization plays that someone can do. Just think about, they dominate monthly usage on the kind of the GPT AI assistant plays, right? That's now going into search. It's just going to be exciting. So this just added probably $3 billion more to their probably upcoming IPO. So I'm excited for this, and I am not excited about the agent operator use cases. I find it clunky. It still wasn't doing what I'm supposed, like the way I would do it, but it's just, this is the worst it is. It is only going to become better, and it's exciting to see how that comes about. Ardis, we don't have time to go deeper onto Claude for Excel agent. So just a notable drop, because I'm so excited, as an analyst at Core, right? I'm excited about this one. If you know how the kind of data analysis and machine learning work kind of worlds, you know that there's a divide in the financial sector where they have not migrated to the tools that dominates advanced analytics. They are lovers of Excel. It is an important tool. It has some features, and currently dominating that space. It's a Microsoft land grab, right? Excel dominates our financial sector. So Claude for Excel brings a natural language kind of reasoning into spreadsheets, and it's fascinating. Really, what we can do here is looking at formulas, dependency scenarios, like cell creation, like really Anthropic. It's going in all out, challenging. I don't know how worksheet creation should look like and how you can iterate. I just had a conversation last weekend with some of my friends who are auditors and whatnot. They spent the entire weekend finding one error in a cell, and they cannot replicate it because that's one of the issues with it. So you now are able to launch an agent, and weekends are given back to people, right? So it's an exciting drop. We'll follow it. But yeah, agents, the analyst, and being application adjacent or native, it's kind of where it's at. So Ardis, are you ready to switch gears to our second part of this? All right. So we spoke about, Amazon, Amazon, it's a really important, shift in organizational kind of signals in AI. We spoke about Aura, too, and Atlas. We think about platform signals. I just can kind of give you this quick drop on Claude for Excel, so Anthropic kind of embedded agent signals in market, silos. So all these are signals that we're seeing that shape AI products and the economy. So the shift that we want to do here is we have been in the field significantly, and there's a ton of signals that are happening in the field, right? So one of the things that we wanted to spend a good chunk of is describing what are we seeing, how AI in the Agentic playbook it's coming along. I had the opportunity to be at ASU, where for the first time, a whole conference is dedicated not to AI, but specifically agentic AI and the intersect of agentic AI and student experience. Fascinating scenario, artists. And this is where these type of conferences, now you see the technology vendors who come in. So obviously Element for 51, but then Google, Microsoft, IBM. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on my vendors. Just think about the biggest players, ServiceNow. And it was fascinating to see how they shape this conversation at scale, right? The numbers that were thrown here are just very interesting. We're talking about how this is working and it's impacting 80,000 students. I just did a POC with the University of Pennsylvania where, I don't know, 100,000 users went through this and used that. It's a very, very good conversation. So I'm happy to debrief, but before I go and do my part, Ardis, can you just do a recap of where you've been and kind of the big themes that you're seeing, and then I'll do my part and then you do your part, but where have you been and what are the high level themes here?
Yeah. So for the past couple of weeks, we, one of the things, we had our board meeting 2 weeks ago, and the big theme of the conversation was, okay, Element, like, how we're positioning ourselves and how we're thinking about this next wave and the transition from just becoming just a SaaS company that's providing software to now providing AI agent teams, and how that's fitting into the market. So we came out of that and then followed through with two different conferences. Actually three. One of them was the ACCT, which is the Association for Community College Trustees. And this is the folks who are kind of setting the vision and the policies and working with community colleges. And we had a couple of presentations in there talking about the future of education and how agentic AI is kind of changing that. And the conversations during that conference, this is an older demographic. As you can imagine, there's obviously community colleges a little bit different, but they're thinking about students from the 16-year-old to 60-year-old students, open access, resource constrained. It's one of the fastest growing kind of demographics in terms of the fastest growing kind of educational institutions, segments. And the conversations were all about, okay, how can we serve our students better? This AI thing, we're seeing some starting to understand what it is and what it does, but the conversations were not around, okay, let's talk about the technology, the application, and the nuances of that. Very, very different from last year to this year. The conversations this year is more, they're all about how can we incorporate these technology into our campuses. I want to push my president. So as we have conversations with the trustees, they get it, right? They get it. And they're like, I want to push my presidents to move things forward. Many, many conversations were talking to a trustee and they're like, I'm going to bring my president over so you guys can talk about and see what's happening here. So the recognition is there that we need to do things differently and need to change. And now it's about like, how do you drive those resources? The other one was then go from, board of trustees that like, probably at one end of the spectrum in terms of technology adoption, you go to EduCause, which is the largest ed tech conference in terms of technologists, CIOs, campus technology vendors and solutions in the market. And this one is in Nashville, Tennessee, and we were in an exhibit hall, which was one of the largest ever. I don't know how many people were there, but we have conversations with, hundreds of CIOs there. This year, it was very, very different from prior years. Folks are really getting into the use cases and the ROI perspective on how this thing, this AI is working. However, one of the surprising things was there were all the large vendors there, from Google to Microsoft to higher ed specific vendors like Ellucian and Anthology and Workday and so on and so forth. I thought there was going to be a lot more discussion around agents, and there was going to be a lot more discussion and a lot more conversations around how these agents are moving into the workspaces and kind of the problems that they're solving. I was a little disappointed that those conversations, or not necessarily the conversations, but the other vendors, like it wasn't as clear to them, like, how they're doubling down or what their solutions are for higher education with agentic AI. There was maybe a handful, maybe a dozen or so that were in our specific area or group. There was Box, for example, which is the horizontal. There was a lot of the horizontal players like Google and Microsoft and Box, and they were talking about some of the agent stuff, but they also had to balance between teaching and learning, technology, and so on and so forth. So not a lot of agentic platforms to kind of fit this need. And I was really, really surprised by that.
Which is the opposite end of what I saw, and I'll give you that brief. But as you describe this journey, Ardis, is you're starting to see the play of all versions of AI, right? And by all players. So you have the view of the mass, if you will, right? So as you start to debrief, that's kind of the signature I'm picking up. It's so interesting, right? Your notes of the field, if anything, is kind of the state of all AI, right? All right, keep on going. I just want to make that point.
No. So that's very fair. So in terms of the themes that are emerging and the kind of questions that were being asked and how, in the past, last year, for example, the conversations there was no distinction around AI. It was all around we need some AI solution or we want to kick the tires. So the conversations were not around, okay, how does this fit into our ecosystem? What's the best, architecture deployment? Why is this one solution better than another? You could not have those discussions last year. This year, that has transitioned. A lot of folks are coming off from failed POCs or failed vendors. They were just wrappers or they promised the world and that. So, we had dozens and dozens of conversations where they came in and said, hey, we tried this vendor, we tried that vendor, and the results were not there. There's nothing there. We couldn't make it work. We couldn't integrate it. It looked really good in the demo, but we just, didn't get any results. So those are the conversations that we were having over and over again. And we were able to come in from and essentially come in and say, look, the consensus is there's solutions that they have, or there is technology that they have on campus, but they're looking for a solution. They're looking for an outcome. And the discussion is much easier today to say, okay, let's focus on the outcome and forget about the tech stack that you have. We're not going to integrate with or we can integrate with your Slate or your Salesforce, but let's figure out what the outcome is and where you're going, like, what do you want the outcome to be? And then forget about like how it fits into your tech stack, because those solutions are going to be left behind, right? The Slates of the world or the file cabinets, so to speak, right? That's not where the value is. Last year, people were thinking, well, I already have a CRM. Well, I already have this. Are you duplicative, right? Are you X or Y? So they're comparing the platform versus comparing the outcome and comparing agents. This year, it's all about the outcome, and that's how they're thinking about it. So the more the conversations were shifting towards, oh, you guys are competing with the service provider, the labor layer. We're competing with the agency model. You're competing with the AB, for example. You're competing with RNL versus you're competing with Slate, right? Like that is the conversation has now shifted, and folks are getting it, that agents are not competing with the current software. They're actually competing with the labor and the work, and in a lot of cases that is consultants and agencies that charge hundreds of thousands of dollars to get those outcomes. Does that make sense?
Oh, totally, right. And one of the important things that happens here is that I saw in my journey, right? At ASU, which I actually had the opportunity to, meet with a lot of presidents, deans. I also had the opportunity to moderate a panel. This is where the state of the art and the bubble of the bubble kind of gets enacted. So The conversation from assistance to autonomy drove the conversation. So I want agents and I want agents to work. So it felt different to the frustrations or the sound bites that you just capture, right? And the first thing I like to riff on, and I wonder what you think of this. The conversation started with, okay, where is my data layer and how is this technology, agentic, tools are going to plug in? Because everyone understands that for these new solutions to be the system of action, as we refer them, it's just not a wrapper, right? You need to have access to all the data. The data object is where it's at. So the nativeness of you will, and like, how is the CRM connected to the SMS, to the LMS, to the SIS, like communications? Because driving, student personalization to the next level and kind of autonomous decision requires that. And it was a really interesting conversation, and having leaders follow and prompt it, it's very refreshing, because we know that is the divide between fluff, noise, or buzz, right? What is real or not. That some of these agentic tools would fail if they don't have the right context. So that was very fascinating. And literally, I was surprised that on day one, we're talking about autonomy and like the richness of the data object in which it will be connecting. In other words, how are vendors orchestrating? Right? Very different conversation.
Yeah. I think yours might have been a little bit more ahead. So ASU is naturally one of the folks who are deploying agents on the field, but the rest of the orgs are getting there, and the conversations are advancing. They're past the bullshit of, let's just try a bunch of things, and now the conversations are, okay, show me the ROI. Like, where else have you done this thing? And we're having much easier conversations because we've been doing this now for like 3 years at Element, and we have a POV on like what agents need. They need a lot of data, they need a lot of context, they need a lot of tools in order to work the best. So we have a lot easier conversations with those folks today.
How did you see that in the thousands conversations that you had in the presentations of what does my AI connect to? Is it still like people think that, it's for granted? I saw that you also wrote a blog post following our 3 series drops on, and we spoke at length of this, but how did you see that in your journey, and how the maturity of your technology is not going to work because you just don't have the right feeds on it, right?
So the conversations around where the data lives is super important, and we were having more and more of those. And a lot of folks still think that they need to keep some of their technology, like CRMs. However, when we start talking about outcomes and the jobs to be done and how agents solve that, it becomes very apparent that they're like, well, I don't really need the CRM. Like, I can just, implement this solution right now and then move the whole, like, eliminate my CRM altogether. We were not able to have those conversations last year because last year they just didn't know.
Oh, so they're popping. So they're coming.
Yeah. So last year we were having conversations like, well, do we do a wraparound, or what's a existing architecture where we can send data back and forth? And the conversations this year are more like, okay, we understand that the CRM is probably going to need to be moved away and that the value is in the agents, but how can we make that happen during this transition period, right? It can be 6 months for some of them, it can be a year for others as they move through. And implementing different use cases is super important. And that's been the unlock, I would say, for a lot of folks, is that you don't have to do the whole thing. You can implement specific use cases and then grow into more and more and more agentic use cases as you move those workflows from your current systems that are human driven and moving them to a platform where the agents are doing the work. So I don't know if that makes sense to you, JC, but this, that's been the unlock for a lot of folks. It's like, it's not a one-to-one platform switch, right? It's not like you kill your CRM and then move into a different platform. It's no. Your CRM cannot do this. You need the agentic platform, but you need the agentic platform to be ready for you to grow into, because all the data from your CRM and the workloads eventually need to move to that platform in a year. So showing them that path, it's super important.
Contrasting what you just said to my experience by the way, there's about 600 attendees to this conference. So it's significantly attended, right? And probably the 300 to 400 different universities represented there, right? So the adoption mindset is a little shifted here, right? So, when these universities start thinking already about adoption, we can assume that they are far ahead in their maturity. So the view of adoption is that AI is an operational enabler, not really a novelty. So it's a really interesting conversation, right? Because what happens is, agent language is already kind of commonplace, and very fast the obsession for ROI is where it's at. And some of the limits that I'm starting to see here, or maybe the fascination that I came to learn, it's the outcomes and the problems that we're trying to solve with agents are expensive problems. And the low-hanging fruit, where you and I took element, in the first internal, right, in the first quarter of this year, where we are taking our customers in many of the use cases, it's really good, it's low-hanging fruit. But agents really starting to do their magic on expensive problems feels different. And it was a different conversation for me to have that. So just want to drop that because, as you mentioned, ROI is important and adoption becomes an issue. I just saw that to be slightly different in my conversations with friends at ASU.
Exactly.
What else did you see? Any questions, patterns that you saw in your days out of home?
Conversation has completely shifted to what are the use cases that we need to apply first, right? And kind of this evolution. It's not anymore around like capabilities. And people questioning, well, what models are you using, and how is your infrastructure, to like what the capabilities, to now is like, okay, what use cases and what problems are you using, right? Like we didn't get a lot of questions around what models we're using, whereas last year it was all about bias and models and how do you make sure that you don't put out fake information. Like we've evolved from that, so those aren't the questions anymore. Agent language is becoming a lot more commonplace, so folks understand language. You can say, hey, have you heard of Agent Force, for example? So we're benefiting tremendously from that big marketing engine that Salesforce has, and obviously the rest of the companies, everybody's moving agentic, so everybody understand that agents are kind of the where work gets done and how they work. So it's not about like the AI features or AI in general. It's more like, okay, what agents are able to do and how they fit into a specific workflow and kind of an outcome there. So that's really important. And then the other questions, obviously, we talk about ROI, right? So the ROI, it's all about ROI right now. So everybody's looking to see, okay, where can we deploy these agents and what's the ROI for that use case? And not everybody has it figured out. So we're hearing a lot of, we want to add it here, we want to add it here, we want to add it here, but they just don't have the internal capabilities to think through the process transformation or the digital transformation work that they need to do in order to agentify those processes. And this is where vendors like Element 451 and even agencies, they have a big responsibility here, because moving something to an agentic workflow, it's not the same as just replacing a piece of software underneath. You have to rethink about the process. And this is the theme that was more apparent to me, was some folks have access to the technology, but the adoption is very, very low, and they're not utilizing it to its fullest, right? So they even though they have access to some agents, they're just not using it, or it's not doing what they need to do. And this is a problem that even Element, for example, has right now. And this is our biggest, flashlight that we're putting on the business, is like, how do we move people to adoption, so they can see real value from it? Because it's a very different mindset, right? You can't just have access to it. Now you have to think about moving that workflow. It's like, how do you build an agent that does that work? If you don't have the processes, if you don't have it all, the operating procedures thought out, right? The SOPs, it's like, how do you convert this workflow to an agentic workflow? Well, you can't, right? So you need to build that first. And that's the biggest barrier that we see right now. Talk to folks at Accenture, talk to folks at Huron. These are large companies that are helping institutions. Deloitte, so they're working with really large institutions to help them move those workflows, but nobody's really working with the smaller institutions, right? So they're kind of getting left behind. And then, of course, providers like Element, we only have so much bandwidth to do the digital transformation work. So we're focusing on the technology and how can technology accelerate that. But, there's a lot of work that needs to happen from the campus side in order for them to utilize these tools 100%.
I think this is a good way to start kind of wrapping up. Look, everywhere you go, campuses, conferences, board meetings, you can feel it, right? AI isn't coming for us anymore. It's like coming with us, right? And in the field, like these conversations have shifted, right? I'm totally hearing it. I heard it in the more advanced conferences. I'm hearing from you, right? Is, from what AI can do, art to the possible, to like, what are we automating first? And the part that I kind of enjoy from your last bit is I'm hearing pilots are becoming playbooks, right? And the curiosity that everyone had in a way has turned into confidence, right? So still a lot of work to be done, but these are some of the signals that I was able to extract. So thanks for your recon and intelligence. I've kind of enjoy your travels through your narrative here, and I hope that you and also our followers enjoyed some of our drops and connections to our travels.
All right, till next time, everybody. Thank you. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed leaders and professionals like you find their next big idea. They feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts, like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Jenny Lee Fowler, Brian Gross, and many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.